Padme Om. Om Mani Padme Om. Om Mani Padme Om. Good morning and welcome to the Sunday service. This morning we're going to meditate few minutes before the Dhamma talk. I just want to mention before you start meditation, our co-founder, Venerable Dr. Karuna Dhamma, who passed away 10 years ago, February 22nd. 10 years ago, I believe February 2014. Yes, so almost 10 years ago. We did last Sunday also something for her. Just think about her because she's a great teacher and she has a lot of good students, including Shraddha and Kashanti. They are the best students, I think, on Karuna's. She say like that to me most of the time. Anyway, we will talk a little bit about later. So think about Karuna and wishing her also the to attain the Nibbana, and thinking about that, just do the meditation right now. Subodha is going to lead the metta meditation.
All right, let's get into a comfortable position. Close your eyes. And let's begin with 3 deep breaths. And now, think thoughts of metta, loving kindness, goodwill, beginning with yourself. This is a wholesome desire, a sincere wish for your true happiness. More than just words that we tell ourselves, more than just thoughts that we have. These are real intentions that we are cultivating. We might think to ourselves, may I be happy. May I be peaceful. May I be free from stress and pain, free from suffering, free from harm. May I live with heart and mind unburdened by greed, aversion, delusion. May I look after myself with ease. And extend those thoughts further to your loved ones, to your family, to your friends, to your teachers and guides on the path, all those that you admire, all those that you respect. May they be happy. May they be peaceful. May they be free from stress and pain, free from suffering, free from harm. May they live with minds and hearts unburdened by greed, aversion, delusion. May they look after themselves with ease. And we extend these thoughts to the people we don't know so well, the various acquaintances we have. To them too, we extend our metta, our loving kindness, our goodwill. May they be happy. May they be peaceful. May they be free from stress and pain, free from suffering, free from harm. May they live with hearts and minds unburdened by greed, aversion, delusion. May they look after themselves with ease. And we extend our metta even to those that we have difficulty getting along with, those in our lives or those that we might know of that are hard to respect, hard to admire, even those that may call us enemy. To them too, we extend our metta. May they be happy. May they be peaceful. May they be free from stress and pain, free from suffering, free from harm. May they live with hearts and minds unburdened by greed, aversion, delusion. May they look after themselves with ease. If all people everywhere had these qualities, lived in this way, then we would all be able to live together in admirable friendship. So it's with that in mind that we extend our metta, our goodwill, in all directions, to all sentient beings, to the north, to the south, to the east, to the west, above and below, to all beings everywhere. May they be happy. May they be peaceful. May they be free from stress and pain, free from suffering, free from harm. May they live with hearts and minds unburdened by greed, aversion, delusion. May all beings everywhere look after themselves with ease. And with our hearts and minds uplifted and gladdened with the metta that we've been cultivating, let us now turn to our breath. As you breathe in, as you breathe out, find the space in your body where you feel the breath most easily. The place in your body where it feels the most easy to stay with the breath. And as you sit here cultivating, training your mind may wander, but bring it back to the breath time and time again. And with that, you are strengthening your mindfulness, strengthening your concentration, using and relying on skillful effort. So continue this practice of staying with your breath, residing in your body, meditating this way until you hear the bell.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Subodha, leading the metta meditation. Before you, today our speaker, by the way, Subodha. So before you start your talk, I want to mention few things. Thanks for the last Sunday uh, Lunar New Year service. Whoever attended to the service and helped to us to provide food and everything, I just want to thank. It was very successful. I think everybody happy about that. Next Sunday, the first Sunday of the month, Subodha is going to lead the mini meditation, which is start around 9:30 to 10:30 the meditation time. So you can come and join with Subodha. And same Sunday, Subodha is going to lead the meditation and chanting 11 o'clock. Because Kusala is not going to be here that Sunday, he's going somewhere else. So we put the Subodha about that Sunday to lead the chanting and meditation. Again, regarding the Reverend Karna, I mentioned earlier, she passed away like 10 years ago. And you know, I am very close to her. Most of people here don't know about the Reverend Karna, except Radha and Kashanti and Mr. Nam and Stephen. I think we all know about the Reverend Karna, who she is, and others don't know about the Reverend Karna. I know since 1985, first time I met her in Sri Lanka, 1985. She was in Sri Lanka. I was with her going and here and there. I was traveling with her. I'm the travel guide. End of the traveling, and she asked me whether I like to go to America. I say yes. Then she said, let me know whenever you're ready. Then after a few years later, I believe in 1988, I sent the letter, I like to come to America. So she sent me an invitation. Then I come to the IBMC 1988. Since that, I'm here and I'm helping to Reverend Karna a long time, so many ways. She's like my mother. Sometimes she's yelling to me, sometimes you know about her, how she is. And so, however, we have a good time. I have very good respect for her, and I want to show my gratitude to her also. When she is living with us, I help so many ways. Actually, the last time when I going to the visit her, I believe 2014, myself and Vinita and Sumana Venerable Sumana, we all are driving to the Sacramento, and we got the message on the way, she passed away. So we sit there, we respect to her that day, we come back again. So I have a lot of memories about her. I just want to say a few things because of the, you know, her Memorial Day, which whatever is 22nd. That's why I'm talking, just taking only few minutes to talk about her. She's a great teacher, great nun, and helped me in so many ways. Not only for me, so many ways to help to so many people, and we miss her a lot of, you know. So what can we do? That's the way, that's the nature, you know. She passed away. I just want to say that's it about her. So Subodha, you can start your Dhamma talk right now.
Thank you, Bhante. I pay homage to the Buddha. I pay homage to the Dhamma. I pay homage to the Sangha. Last month, I meant to give a talk on right view and right resolve. And only after the fact did I realize I mostly gave a talk on right view and didn't even really touch on right resolve. So I resolve to talk on resolve today. And I want to start it by touching on something that came up a few weeks ago, this question that was posed that I think warrants exploration. And this question that was posed was, do we need to experience something first before we can renounce it? You know, this kind of question, I think, is important because we tend to think of life as being very contained, especially here in the West, but this view is growing. That we have this one life and just this short amount of time to just get the most out of life we can possibly get. And we tend to think of that in terms of experiences. We tend to think that what we're here to do is just get the most out of every moment, squeeze all the juice out of every experience, and rack up those experiences, to have as much fun, as much adventure, as much anything. Even happiness and sadness, all of it is good. All of it is something we're trying to live maximally until we die. And so there can be this tendency to think that the spiritual stuff can be put off till later. We have our fun first while we're young, we make mistakes, we learn, we have experiences, and then it's only in our golden years at the end that we start to get spiritual. And even if this is not something that we explicitly know as a culture, it's certainly something that we implicitly live. All you need to do to see it is to go to, in my experience from what I've seen, go to any Catholic or Christian church. And you will see that predominantly the congregation is made up of people 55 plus, like it's some retirement camp on Sundays, right? And it's because a lot of the younger people are too busy living to do any of the spiritual work. So there's this tendency to look at life as this very contained thing. And it's all about experiences. But the Buddha didn't look at it that way, this life that we have. For starters, he viewed life as something that spanned multiple lifetimes. But not only that, but even within this one lifetime, when we really pay attention to it, when we really look around, he valued those that from a young age got the idea that like, no. A lot of these things I should start looking at now and to look at the experiences of others. But I'll circle back to the idea of multiple lifetimes because it's something that I don't hear a lot as a Western Buddhist. It's one of those things that I find while reading the suttas, while reading the Pali Canon, again and again and again as a reference, as something to hold as important, as a view that the Buddha had as part of the foundations before even getting into the noble parts of the path. This idea of two things, of rebirth and karma. And there are those two things that are often not discussed until much later. We start off with other things in the West. We start off with meditation, and you do meditation and oh, doesn't it feel good? Don't you feel relaxed? You're following the breath and everything. We start off with the pleasant side effects of meditation. It can lower your blood pressure, make you a little happier, you'll do these things. And then maybe we'll get around to the precepts, like maybe it's good while you meditate, maybe don't, be telling lies or take things that don't belong to you or getting involved in illicit relationships and so on. But this other part we leave out entirely, almost, looking at things in terms of this one life. And if you look at this journey you're on as only this one life, as many of us do, you end up having this feeling of this ticking clock in terms of experience. There's a reason why so many people on social media that are around my age are panicking that they're quickly approaching, if not directly in, middle age. Because they're all a generation of people that lived on the internet. So while other people have the past as being this kind of amorphous thing that exists in the back of their mind, like, don't you remember what high school was like? Man, we got the videos We got the MySpace, we got the Facebook, we have a lot of evidence of the silliness we were involved in, college and whatnot. We've been chronicling our lives so much on social media that it feels like it happened just yesterday. You see it all the time. People posting online and they're like, wow, it's so weird that I'm celebrating my 40th birthday because it doesn't make any sense. I'm actually 25, you know? Or it's weird that my son just turned 21. I'm only 26. And these people are making jokes, but there's an actual panic there about the fact that they're aging, about the fact that they're getting older, about the fact they're approaching middle age. And then for older people, say more of the Gen X area, they're getting in their 50s and 60s, kind of same, and kind of the same across the board. Everyone's kind of panicking that they're getting older. And in light of that, there's this desire to have more experiences, more adventures. People are afraid of missing out. We come up with acronyms like FOMO, the fear of missing out. There's all these things that we're trying to do, trying to catch on to, trying to consume in a sort of frenzied and panicked way. And even those who are more of the spiritual bent, those that do find the value in going off to temples, going off to retreats, there even is that sense of like, no, but I need to experience all of it. I can't be left out. I can't leave things behind. I can't go without. And so you have this sort of spiritual tourism that begins, this desire to go out and go out and go out and go out. I think it's helpful to have the perspective of multiple births in mind because it really does curb that tendency to seek out experiences in that panicked way. Because the Buddha, in looking at multiple lifetimes, doesn't say that like, well, you've got to experience it all and wasn't it all worthwhile? Didn't it make you super happy and fulfilled? You've lived as a king, you've lived as a god, you've lived as a princess, you've been the potter, the shoemaker, you've been this thing and that thing, you've had that, you've missed out on this, you've done this, without any without conceivable beginning, without a beginning that even makes any sense. You've been going in this wandering on. You've accumulated so many experiences. Aren't you fulfilled? No, he has precisely the different message. In the Asu Sutta, the Tears Sutta out of the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha begins by addressing his monks and he goes, hey monks, what do you think is greater? All the tears that you've shared over multiple rebirths, or all the water in the 4 great oceans? And when you think about how much water exists in the oceans, probably more than 4 great at this point, that's a lot of water, right? Our planet is mostly water. And so someone might go like, well, that's a lot of water. But the monks go, well, no, it seems more likely that the tears that we've shed over multiple rebirths, that would be far greater than all of the water in the great oceans. And the Buddha says yes. And he goes on, remember, this is someone who on the night of his own awakening, his own unbinding, was able to not only see that rebirth was something that all of us experience, that karma and consequence is something that we all experience, but he saw his own lifetimes. Past. And he got to see it all. And if you ever read the suttas where the Buddha does discuss his past lives, he doesn't talk about how fun or cool or what crazy adventures he went on. Sometimes he shares specific stories because there's good lessons. But in talking about it himself, he's more like, well, I was this kind of guy, I lived in this sort of town, I ate that kind of food, I did that sort of stuff, and then I died. And then I was this guy, and I ate that kind of food, and then I died. And then he just goes on, and you get to feel the kind of monotonous tone of it. But when addressing the monks, he goes much further than that. And so I'll share some of that with you now, because the language, I think, really strikes at this feeling that we're developing in terms of experiences and trying to acquire and collect them. Long have you repeatedly experienced the death of a mother, the tears you have shed over the death of a mother while transmigrating and wandering this long, long time, crying and weeping from being joined with what is displeasing, being separated from what is pleasing, are greater than the water in the 4 great oceans. Long have you repeatedly experienced the death of a father, the death of a brother, the death of a sister, the death of a son, the death of a daughter, loss with regard to relatives, loss with regard to wealth, loss with regard to disease. The tears you have shed over loss with regard to disease while transmigrating and wandering this long, long time, crying and weeping from being joined with what is displeasing, being separated from what is pleasing, are greater than the water and the four great oceans. Why is that? From an inconceivable beginning comes transmigration. A beginning point is not evident. Though beings hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving are transmigrating and wandering on. Long have you thus experienced stress, experienced pain, experienced loss, swelling the cemeteries, enough to become disenchanted with all fabricated things, enough to become dispassionate, enough to be released. So there are a few things there worth acknowledging, worth pointing out. I would say that the fact that when the Buddha talks about these lives that we've lived, there's no inconceivable beginning. And also that this even exists because we are hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving. So think about the kind of mentality we have about life. Because we don't remember our previous lifetimes, because we don't know what we've already had and what we've already lost, we tend to think that we just have this one life to accumulate as much as possible, to do as much as possible, to grasp and cling to as much as possible. And part of that is that ignorance that he acknowledges, and part of that is that craving. So to go back to that initial question, do we need to experience a thing before renouncing it? No, not in this lifetime. Because if we take on rebirth as what we might call a provisional belief, maybe at first it's not a belief that we take on easily. Perhaps it's a belief that we struggle with. Perhaps it's a belief that we greatly doubt even. We can take it on provisionally as a perception, something to help with this idea of renunciation, help with this idea of disenchantment. Because there are plenty of lifetimes where you've experienced this thing and that thing, had more, had less. And the problem is not those experiences. The problem is the quality of mind, ignorance, and craving. I'll point to an example. My cat is not a very smart cat, but a pretty typical cat. And this cat does not know the taste of filet mignon, does not know the taste of chocolate chip ice cream, does not know the taste of albóndigas, right? Plenty of foods that she's never had. But what she has had is, for majority of her life, a serving of dry food in the morning and a serving of wet food in the evening. And without experiencing all of those things, every single day, without fail, her mind is resolute. Her mind is on one thing: food. When am I going to eat? When am I going to eat? When am I going to eat? And you better believe, first thing in the morning, when either my wife or I go to the food bowl and put that scoop of dry food, the way she runs after it, the way she bounds after it, the way she meows, the satisfied smack as she gets into the crunch of it. And then the wet food, my goodness, even more excitement, right? Something that to you and me smells awful. The smell of cat food, we all know it. It smells disgusting. It smells not like food, but to her, best thing ever. And even though nothing about it changes, the food itself remains the same every day. She craves after it, obsesses over it, thinks about it, will literally claw your face for it. And it's this thing that it's the same every single day. Now the thing is, we tend to think that, well, yeah, that's the cat, right? We're different. We get to eat different things for breakfast, different things for lunch, different things for dinner. We get to go to cafes. We get to go to Six Flags. We get to go to Disneyland. We get to go on roller coasters. We get to do so many things. And the Buddha would say that, yeah, but in comparison to unbinding, in comparison to Nibbana, it's the same as that cat food. And we're just as excited for it. That's the truth of it in comparison to Nibbana and compared to unbinding. We're like that cat chasing after that wet food, that stinky, gross food, and going, oh, this is the best ever. Been thinking about this all day. That's the quality that we have to our lives when we think we've got this one life and we get excited for every little thing that we're going after. So what I'm discussing here is essentially what I've been discussing for the last few months, what even Silas has been discussing for the last few months, which is really getting at the heart of right view, which ends up leading into right resolve. The Buddha, when he was doing his own training, his own cultivating of his mind, came to this idea himself. He told himself, all right, I'm going to look at my thoughts. I'm going to look at what I'm intending with my mind, what I'm doing with purpose, and I'm going to separate them into two groups. And in the West, when we discuss it, we tend to talk about what he viewed as skillful and what he viewed as unskillful. And in the skillful group, he wanted certain qualities. And the unskillful group, he wanted other qualities. In the unskillful group, he noticed that what he considered unskillful were those thoughts that were intending and directing toward sensuality. And those thoughts that were trending toward thoughts that were about ill will. And those thoughts that were dealing in harmfulness. And that meant that conversely, in the skillful group, he saw those thoughts, those intentions, those resolves as skillful, those ones that were about renunciation, that were about non-ill will, that were about harmlessness. And that is then what he decided to do with his meditation at first. Seeing the unskillful, seeing the thoughts of sensuality, the thoughts of ill will, the thoughts of harmfulness, and to see them for what they were and to abandon them, let them go. Apply those intentions of letting go to those thoughts. And then on the other side, to what was skillful, seeing the renunciation, seeing the non-ill will, seeing the harmlessness, and cultivating those more. And he thought to himself as he was cultivating this, I see no harm in what I'm doing. I'm developing renunciation, and I see no harm in this. When I develop this, it doesn't cause any harm to myself. It doesn't cause any harm to others. It doesn't cause harm to myself or others. And he did the same thing with non-ill will, and he did the same thing with harmlessness. The only negative, the only downside that he saw to developing those good types of thoughts, those good intentions, those good resolves, is that spending your time thinking about those things all the time ends up being a little tiring. And so he decided that, well, I'll develop these thoughts, but I'm also going to develop concentration. Times when I set those thoughts aside to not think at all. Develop really deep samadhi and set them aside. Which means that we have these good qualities that we build on to help get into concentration. And in concentration, we give up and abandon all of those thoughts entirely. But we are developing these thoughts, and they are more than thoughts, more than just lofty ideas. Right? The Pali term for what ends up being translated sometimes as right thought or right resolve is sankappa. And sankappa has other qualities behind the term. It can also mean intention. It can also mean purpose. And I think that purpose in this light, of this conversation we're having, becomes really important because then what we're talking about is living and thinking with purpose, with intentionality. What we're really getting at the heart of this, is a purposeful life. And purpose to, in what regard, right? To the blameless, to the deathless, to be free of the kind of harm that we can cause ourselves in our run-of-the-mill day-to-day lives. We're doing something to provide safety to ourselves and safety to others. So in light of that, when we look at these three qualities, we can see how renunciation itself is also really about those other two things. Non-ill will and harmlessness are not just about how we relate to others. They're also about how we relate to ourselves. Renunciation isn't just good for the world, it's good for you. Non-ill will and harmlessness remind me of a couple ideas I came across when I was studying to be a therapist. I ended up not completing my study, but I did find a lot of value in what I learned in regard to ethical conduct for psychotherapists. There were two things that I have taken away as not just ideals for a skillful therapist, but ideals for a skillful Buddhist following the path. And one of the things we're already familiar with, because it's one of those things that doctors always uphold, which is like to do no harm. We've probably heard this on a lot of TV shows. If you watched ER and it's 20 seasons or something, or if you watched any other kind of like show like that, there's always that like, we do no harm here in this hospital or something like that, whatever. But there is this idea to do no harm, right? And the term ethically for it is non-maleficence, which I think is a fun word to say. But there is that quality, right? Non-maleficence, to do no harm. But then there's more than that, a directive to do more than that, which is then beneficence, to not just not do any harm, but to also do good. And that's one of the things that I think that as Buddhists we're also cultivating. So to look at it in that way, when we talk about non-ill will and harmlessness, we're talking about non-maleficence and beneficence. To take them to the Brahma Viharas, when we're talking about non-ill will, we're talking about goodwill. We're talking about the kind of metta that we were developing at the beginning of this service. As we were developing our meditation on metta, we were working on non-ill will. We were working on goodwill. The other quality, harmlessness, I think relates very strongly to compassion. Right? Compassion in many ways ends up being metta put into practice. So harmlessness is our goodwill put into action. And so we see in all three a particular way of being, relating to the world and relating to ourselves and relating to each other in terms of renunciation, in terms of non-ill will, in terms of harmlessness. Right? Those are the resolves that we have. That's the purpose we give ourselves in developing the path. All right. So I have now, I think, satisfactorily, at least to myself, covered a right resolve, which I forgot to do last month. So I'll end my talk there, and if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.
It would seem to me that resolve may be the hardest of the sevenfold path to follow for spiritual development. Because in Buddhism, we try and see things as they are. It's the step beyond that that can be really tough, beguiling at times. And so you see things as they are. Now, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
And that makes resolve in the light that you had just depicted it. It seemed like the hardest of all those sort of steps.
It might be. I think that's part of the reason why in certain Buddhist traditions they tend to put right view and right resolve as sort of like the culmination of the path. But when the Buddha was talking about the path, I think he put those first for a reason, because they're part of the path that, well, the whole path develops over time, but right view and right resolve are things that develop and get deeper as we practice as well. Because like even as you were putting it, it's to see things as they are. Well, I would say that that's something that happens in stages and deepens throughout the practice, seeing things as they are. When you start out initially, it's far more personal than that. It's not that you're trying to see things as they are, you're trying to see yourself as you are, which is why the path is so ethics forward, certainly at the beginning. When the Buddha talks about the benefits of meditation, benefits of mindfulness and concentration, it's always after he has sufficiently discussed Buddhist ethics, sila, because that ends up being the foundation. But to do that, you have to have right view and right resolve at the very beginning, because you have to be able to view yourself and see your thoughts and to see your intentions, to see what purpose you're giving your life, and then actually do something about it, to point yourself in various directions, to realize that you have that power, to realize that your actions start at your mind. So even though we are learning to see things as they are, I would say that at the beginning, and as we develop that in the path, that thing we're most focused on is our mind and our heart. We're trying to see our heart as it is and do something about it. So yeah, that's challenging because that is the path. The whole eightfold path is really in the first right view, and to a greater extent as well, right resolve. Like the whole path can be really brought down to that in terms of the mind and the heart. So yeah, I think you're right on the money.
You start off with right view, if the Eightfold Path will unfold in front of you and become more obvious.
I think so. Yeah.
On a personal level, maybe.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yes, this is the first time I heard about it. Right resolve, because I know right view
Mm-hmm.
and right understanding.
Mm-hmm.
The second one is the first time I heard about right
Yeah.
resolve, struggle.
So it all comes down to translation and who did the translation at the time, right? So the way we translate Sankappa is really important. One of the ways it gets translated is just right thought, right? And I think the problem with something like right thought or right understanding or right whatever is that it lets it stay too passive, right? And also, in some ways, it leaves it as something that you may not be able to do something about, which is if you say that like sama sankappa is right thought, think about all the dumb thoughts that pop into your head all throughout the day, right? You walk by a sign and it reminds you of a commercial, and you're like, you just the jingle starts up in your head like da 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 da, just dumb stuff, right? And the thing is even as you cultivate in the path, as you're going about your day, those thoughts are still going to be there, right? The thing is, you no longer identify with those thoughts because you're more concerned about your intentions in regard to thought. You're more concerned with your resolves versus your thoughts, because thoughts just kind of pop up. But resolve, that's something that you're doing intentionally. That's something that you're actually planning to put into action, right? And so the various thoughts you no longer have to identify with. There's this one book that I've read since I was like 14, and I read it again and again. Not because it's necessarily a good book. I'm not putting this out there as a recommendation, but Way of the Peaceful Warrior is something that I read when I was 14. And it's one of those books that it's like a comfort book. I reread it and reread it. And as I develop in the path, I find it less and less useful because it's kind of filled with some hokey stuff. But one of the ideas that comes up, which really sticks with me, is the idea that urges don't matter, actions do. Now, from a Buddhist standpoint, mind activities are also actions. But urges are more just like the thoughts that bubble up. Like you see a commercial for, I don't know, say like you see like a Cinnabon commercial. Do they even have commercials? But say they do, right? And you see the Cinnabon on the TV and they're putting the sauce on it, and like it's so visceral you can almost smell the cinnamon, and you're like, right? But then like that's just a thought that pops up. Your action is what matters. It's the thought that follows that thought. Like now I've thought about the Cinnabon, now I'm going to get into my car, I'm going to drive to the mall, I'm going to find my parking spot, I'm going to go up the stairs, and then all of those actually become actions you follow through on. You find yourself in the car, like that's weird. You're driving there, like I guess I'm getting Cinnabon now, right? That's the way we tend to live, in this automatic way. You get a thought in your head, and before you know it, you're biting into the food, and you're like, oh yeah, look at what I'm doing, right? It's creating a gap between that thought that bubbles up and your actions. So that's one lesson out of what's, to me now, a very silly book that I think is actually worthwhile to keep in mind as we develop on the path. Urges don't matter, actions do. To keep that in mind in terms of right resolve. Yeah. Yeah.
One second. And a lot of people, they wonder, is it right thought and right understand? The first one is it
Right view.
right view.
Yeah.
The people confuse right view and right thought? Is it the same thing, or why
No.
they are different?
So the first one is samaditi, and the second one is samasankappa, right? So diti might be translated as right understanding, and samasankappa might be translated as right thought. But I think view is better than understanding because view is more in alignment with like perception, with having a like a particular take on something. It's because to say that the Four Noble Truths are fully understood is to insinuate that they're fully realized, which is only something that happens at the end. So a view is more like a philosophy, right? So at the beginning, as you're understanding the Four Noble Truths, or at least taking them on, like you're coming to a view, a philosophical view of the Four Noble Truths, like trying to really grapple with like, okay, so there's suffering, there are causes for suffering, there's a way to be released and free from suffering, and there's a path that leads to that realization. And so you can take on those views and then eventually turn those views into perceptions that you bring into your meditation, right? And ultimately at the end, then you come to real understanding, real true realization. That's what the Buddha points to all the time. Like when he's talking to his monks, like they say like, oh, I know, I truly understand. Well, how do you know? How do you understand? And then when he says that, like, once he tests them and they're showing that they understand from their own direct experience, then he says they truly understand. So we have right view at the beginning, right understanding at the end, if we're gonna use those words in that way. But translators you can switch that around; it'd probably be just as meaningful. But it's just a way of translating samaditi, right? So I choose right view. So does my teacher. Same thing with samasankappa and right resolve, right? But again, it's because of this idea of how we come to the Four Noble Truths and the kind of thoughts that we're cultivating, which are not just the passive thoughts that come up, but those with intention, those that we intend to act on. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Subodha. Thank you for everybody. We don't have time much more. We're going to chant the page 4 and page 10. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham saranam gacchami. Dhammam saranam gacchami. Sangham saranam gacchami. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them all. Deluding passions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them all. Dhamma gates are limitless. I vow to study them all. Buddha's way is supreme. I vow to attain it. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and the sick find health relief. When ye do kong aduk vokap punyate ngadang uchong sangye yai kong hai pada. When ye do kong aduk vokap punyate ngadang du chung sangye thank you for everybody again. Thank you, Subodha. So next week, 9:30 to 10:30, we have meditation. Please come and join. After that, we have Sunday service. That's going to be a meditation and chanting also. Please stay with us. We have tea and cookies. Thank you again for everybody. By the power of the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha, you all be well and happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.